It says, yeah,
Yep.
toddlers have twice as many neural connections as adults. And I guess they whittle down through reinforcement.
Yep.
We have more pathways when we're younger. And just like the process of training an AI, we're trained down to like remove the ones that aren't useful and build up on the ones that are.
Yeah, it's both pruning and strengthening.
Okay.
And it seems like in humans, it's actually more pruning than strengthening, but it's both. And in AI, it's the same thing. It's both. So the first portion of training is where they train the AI to predict text, which is kind of like training it to read. And a similar thing does happen in humans. So basically, the random tangle gradually takes shape and gradually sort of coalesces into more useful circuitry that has stored lots of facts about the world and has stored lots of skills for how to, process information and transform it and then produce predictions. That's just the first step. After they do the pre-training, then they try to teach it more useful skills besides just predicting text. And so, by the end of the process, they've thrown lots of coding problems at it. And they've said, like, here's a coding problem, go. Here's a coding problem. Here's an environment. You have access to this virtual computer. Here's like the code base you're working with. You can write code. You can edit the code. You can run the code. You can read it. You can use the internet. Go, go, go. And it does that for a while. And then based on how successful it is, reinforcement happens. And they have thousands, maybe millions of examples of coding problems like that they train it on. And that's why they're so good at coding now.
So what does superintelligence look like in this regard? Is it just more of these connections? And how would they get more connections? Can you explain that to me like I'm 12?
There's different AI models, right? So there's like GPT-3 and GPT-4, GPT 4.5 and GPT-5 and GPT 5.5 and 5.6, right? Sometimes they're just the same previous model, but with extra training.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're a whole new model that's been trained from scratch, including starting the whole pre-training process again. Over the last couple of years, they've done several new rounds of starting over from scratch. And typically when they start over from scratch, they make the whole thing bigger, the artificial brain much bigger.
Okay.
Right now, they're at something like 10 trillion parameters. Back in 2020, it was more like 175 billion. So we've grown like 2 orders of magnitude in 6 years.
2 orders of magnitude.
Yeah, like 2 10x's, so 100x, right? So that process is continuing. They're also improving the algorithms themselves. So they're not literally just the same type of AI, but bigger. They've also come up with all sorts of ideas for how to change the structure of the connections and the neurons and so forth, and change the like reinforcement algorithms that they're using, and to change the training data that they're training on, all sorts of tweaks that have made this whole thing more efficient.
We're literally building a brain.
Basically, yeah. As they make more brains, they're getting better at they're making them bigger and making them more efficient and so forth.
And it's literally modeled on the brain, like the way it works, right?
It's certainly heavily inspired by the brain, but I shouldn't overstate the analogy. Like there's lots of differences too. So for example, the transformer architecture, which is the architecture that they use for these LLMs, is not really recurrent. So the information sort of flows one way rather than allowing all these sort of little loops on the inside. Also, the backpropagation algorithm is different from the sort of learning that naturally happens in human brains. So there are some differences, but yes, like broadly speaking, we are sort of making artificial brains. It's kind of like for brains what like a plane is for a bird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Yeah. That analogy helped me think through a bunch of questions people often ask about AI when they said, can it be creative? But actually that analogy kind of helps me understand that actually that maybe that's not the question. It's, can it produce something that you would consider to be creative? Because creativity is, people think of it as like a process, but actually it's judged based on the output, isn't it?
I mean, you can get philosophical about like, is it truly creativity that they have? But you can also be like, well, I mean, just look at all the stuff they're accomplishing, and it seems like they're going to be accomplishing a lot more in the near future.
Yeah, I do. I asked the question about how this weighs on you personally, because I can sense that you're actually personally bothered.
I mean, I think the situation is crazy. Like, first of all, it's very exciting. Like AI is really fascinating and interesting stuff. I've been following the field for more than a decade now. I've been part of it for some years, and it's really cool, really interesting. And it's really fun to think about what's going on inside these artificial brains and why they are the way that they are. And it's really cool to see all the applications of this technology out in the world. But it really seems like we're on a pretty scary path. And the more you think about it, the more worried you get. And, in stories, it always ends well, but this is real life. And I think we have to sort of stare reality in the face and tell it and realize that like it might not actually end well, you know?
Were there any recent, dare I say, I was going to say eureka moments, but paradigm shifting moments where even your own sort of mental model of what's going on here and how this is going to look were changed for better or for worse?
For better or for worse, and probably for worse, things are kind of on track for AI 2027. There are a few things that have been different, not exactly like paradigm shift differences, but like there have been some differences from what we expected at the time we wrote this. So the government has actually got involved faster than we expected and has been more aggressive than we expected. So the export controls on Mythos being the biggest example, and also threatening Anthropic with being destroyed by the Defense Production Act. Another thing that's been surprising to us is that Anthropic in particular has gone from second place to first place in the race, basically.
Why do you think that happened? Because it seemed like ChatGPT were out front and clear as it relates to OpenAI were out front and clear, but suddenly Anthropic have lapped them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they have probably higher talent density and better strategy, but not by a lot, but enough to make the difference.
Why do you think they have more talent?
Well, they don't have more compute. Like, what are the inputs, right? Like, they're in the lead now. They used to be behind. What are the possible explanations for this? Well, it could have been that they had more resources, like more compute, more money. But that's not true. They have less resources and less money, right? So then I guess talent is the next best alternative. You could maybe say strategy,
focus,
some combination of those things. Yeah. Something that wasn't just like the amount of resources they had.
Just like John Jones, where marginal improvements in your cognitive performance can have a massive impact. Sometimes I podcast for 10 hours a day. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been in filming for a TV show, and then I have like 1 or 2 days off to get all of my work done, which means there's lots of cognitive load. And so I turn to ketones because I find myself more articulate, able to think more clearly, able to work out better when I'm fueled by ketones. And so the reason I became a co-owner of this company and the reason why they now are a sponsor of this podcast is because I remember one of my team members called Christiana, she tried it once and came up to my desk and she goes, "This is the best product ever made." And I think in part that's because she really cares about those cognitive benefits, as I do, as John Jones does, and as I think most of my listeners probably will. So if you haven't tried these yet, all you have to do is go to ketone.com/Stephen, and you'll also get 30% off your first subscription order. You'll get exclusive Ketone IQ merch, and of course, cognitive benefits that might just change your life. Much of the reason most people haven't posted content or built their personal brand is because it's hard and it's time consuming and we're all very, very busy. And if you've never posted something before, there's so many factors in your psychology that stop you wanting to post. What people will think of you. Am I doing this right? Is the thing I'm saying absolutely stupid? All of these result in paralysis, which means you don't post and your feed goes bare.